Good morning and welcome to the first concurrent session of the day, English software demonstration. Our presenter today is Laura Shevlin with Hawks Learning. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. We're also giving away 3 $25 Amazon gift cards at the end of this session. To enter for a chance to win, click the link in the chat to enter your name onto the prize wheel. And on that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Thank you, Joanna. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Let me go ahead and get started here. There we go. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining on today's presentation of our English software demonstration. My name is Laura Shevlin and I'm a senior courseware representative here at Hawks Learning. Before we jump into the software itself, I did want to give y'all a little background on Hawks and who we are as a company, especially for folks who have not had the chance to work with us so far. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's agenda, I'll just be walking through a little bit of background on Hawks as a company. We'll go through our course offerings that we offer in the English world, and then we'll jump into the software and I'll walk you through the student side of our matching homework platform for our English titles. I did want to post the Hawks Learning core values here. Again, for folks who have not had the chance to work with us or are unfamiliar with Hawks and who we are a smaller textbook publishing company, and we really do stand on these kind of 3 pillars here as a company. So affordability, support, and mastery learning. So first and foremost, just making sure all of our textbooks and course materials are affordable and accessible for students. One way that we do this is we offer lifetime licensing for all of our software products, meaning that student access codes never expire. Those are tied to students for life. So if they're moving through a composition course sequence or even have to drop or retake a course, they won't need to repurchase those materials that they already have access to. And those do include new additions and any updates to our software as well. Next up, we have support. So all of our training and support is free and unlimited here at Hawks. We want to make sure that both you and your students feel supported, especially as you're transitioning over to Hawks, and it might be something new for both you and your students. In fact, we do have a phone policy here at Hawks Learning that when someone's calling in, a live person will answer the phone within the first 4 rings. So if at any point you or your students have questions, just know that you're able to get in touch with us. And then lastly, mastery learning. And this is a big differentiator between Hawks versus the other systems that are currently out there right now. I will touch on this a bit more when we get into the software itself, but I did want to mention that all of our Hawks homework lessons are mastery based for students. I did want to go over the Hawks purchasing models here as well. You do have some options as far as how students are accessing these materials. The traditional route is direct from bookstore. So if you typically use your bookstore on campus, that would be an option for your students to purchase from Hawks. That does include that lifetime access code here. And then direct from Hawks as well. So we do have an option on our website for students to purchase directly from Hawks. The biggest difference between that and the traditional bookstore would be that is only for software and ebooks. So we don't offer any printed materials direct from the Hawks site. If you're hoping to bundle print materials, you'll want to go that route of direct from bookstore and stock those through your campus bookstore. And then lastly is inclusive access. If this isn't ringing a bell or something that your school currently does, no need to worry about it, but it is an option here where, student course materials are kind of bundled into their tuition. And we do work with a lot of campuses and bookstores that have the inclusive access set up. The biggest difference between those other 2 purchasing models and inclusive access is going to be that lifetime license. So with inclusive access, when that's bundled in the student tuition, it is a singular semester access code. So like I said, you have options, and this is something we're happy to chat with you about. You and your Hawks rep can connect about how you're envisioning students are purchasing materials if you are considering Hawks for your courses. I did want to jump into our course offerings in the English world. If you're unfamiliar with Hawks, We've been around the English world for about 5 or 6 years now, and we do have several titles that are out there now. So first and foremost, we have our Foundations of English title, which would work well for an integrated reading and writing course. It's more of our developmental level title. Then we do have an English composition course as well. So that would work well for a standard, first year writing course. A lot of schools use it through that first and second of the course sequence. Similarly, we have an English composition plus integrated review, which would work well for a co-requisite style course. So if you do have students who are placing directly into credit level English composition, but a lot of schools are doing away with those developmental style courses where Foundations of English might be a good fit. It pulls a lot of those topics from that Foundations of English title and incorporates them as just-in-time remediation for students to kind of stagger remedial topics paired with the credit level topics of a traditional Comp 1 course. And these three down here are more of our supplemental titles that you can choose to use standalone or pair with any of our main course titles up here on the top row. First, we have our Reading and Writing Handbook. That is available as a printed book or an ebook. We then have our Foundations of English Grammar Workbook, which is a work text style workbook that students are, taking notes in and completing exercises. That is only available as a printed resource. And then our newest title here is our thematic reader. And so that is divided out into different themes. There's over 50 passages in there, and you can choose to use it as a standalone resource, or it can be bundled with any of those titles. It is available as a printed resource or as an ebook. The next thing I wanted to touch on is our guided notebook. And so this is an optional print resource that you can choose to pair with the online homework platform for our Foundations of English title and our English composition with integrated review. So this guided notebook here will only pair with those remedial style lessons, the integrated review lessons. And these guided notebooks are, work text style supplements for students. It will guide them through the note-taking process as they're reading through what we call the learn mode, where all of the instructional content is contained. There's no additional content found in these guided notebooks, but they are great resources, especially for students who might be lacking some of those soft skills like note-taking and study strategies. It's a great thing for them to have in their hands and use as a study tool and take notes in. Those guided notebooks, I've included a couple of the key components of those here. We do have a study skill chapter. We have fill in the blanks and reading applications in there, on your own examples for students to immediately begin applying some of the concepts that they're reading through. There are some key term exercises in there. They have the opportunity to test themselves in the guided notebooks, and then grammar practice is included as well. So these are usually around $20 additional to bundle with any of our software packages. But if you'd like to receive a review copy of these guided notebooks or any of our English titles, just let us know and we'd be happy to ship you one. The next thing I wanted to mention as another supplemental resource that kind of comes along with our English composition title specifically are chapter projects. These align with all of the chapters within English composition, and you can incorporate these for more project-based learning into your course, whether you're teaching an online style course or face-to-face. So just know that this is a resource that we provide to instructors if you wanted to incorporate more project-based learning or just other assignments kind of outside of the Hawks homework lessons or any papers that you have in mind for students. These are largely collaborative, and they really focus on developing creativity and critical thinking skills for students. Some additional resources that I wanted to include here. I did mention those chapter projects for instructors. We also have lecture slides for all of our online courses if you want to use those, and you can tweak and edit in any way that you'd like. And then as an instructor, we do give you access to our full question bank as well. So to build out any type of assessments or worksheets for students, tests, quizzes, whatever you'd like to build out, you do have access to our full default question bank in order to build out any of those types of assignments outside of the Hawks homework lessons. And then for students here, I wanted to put a couple of resources that come along with the homework platform. What resources do they have access to? We do incorporate error-specific feedback into our practice mode. So we do give students really targeted feedback as they're making mistakes in real time. I'll definitely show you how this tool works when we get into the software. We also offer step-by-step tutoring and helpful hints. So if a student is feeling stuck in our practice mode, they do have the option to click on that tutor button in order to get some guidance on, how do I begin answering this question? Students can also create their own practice tests or study guides to help kind of quiz themselves and see where their knowledge of these concepts are at kind of on a larger scale versus the individual homework lessons. So they do have access to that practice test tool and can kind of go in and create those study guides at any point to really see kind of where they're at and how well they're progressing through the course, and ultimately preparing them for any higher stakes assignments in the course like tests or quizzes. Now let's go ahead and toggle over to the student side of the platform, and I will show you what it looks like for a student as they're navigating through Hawks. Let me just refresh my dashboard here because I've been sitting still for a minute. But what I've pulled up here is the student side of our platform. So this is what students would see when they're logging into Hawks. Now, I do want to walk through the dashboard here, especially in the English world. Software isn't typically as common as we see in mathematics. So I did want to point out a couple of things in the dashboard here, especially for those who are unfamiliar with what software would look like in their courses. So here on the top left-hand side of the screen, we have our grades tab. This is where students can access their accurate and up-to-date grades with Hawks. We do sync directly with a couple of different LMS systems, so Canvas, Blackboard, D2L, Brightspace, and Moodle. If you wanted to set up that grade and roster sync so that everything syncs over nicely, you can do that. We also have student single sign-on options as well if you wanted your students accessing the Hawks platform directly through your LMS system. So that just kind of streamlines the account creation process and houses everything all in one place. Now, you don't have to set that up. It's completely optional. There's no extra charge for setting it up either, but we also have our standard site for students to log into if you just wanted to go the standard route as well. The next thing here, we have our ebooks tab. So this is where the online version of the textbook is going to be housed for students. This does come included in their purchase of an access code. So at minimum, they always have the digital version of that textbook included with their purchase. Of course, we do offer bundling options for students if you did want them to have access to a printed text or, any of those supplemental materials like the handbook or the guided notebooks. To the right here, we have our discussions tab with 2 drop-down features. We have our live chat and discussion board. Live chat allows you to instant message with students, and you can hold things like virtual office hours or Q&A sessions before, a paper is due or that next exam in your course. Discussion board allows you to post topics or questions for students, and they can thread their answers below and respond to peers. To the right here, we have our bell notification tab. This will just pop up with notifications for students for any upcoming or overdue assignments. To the right of that, we have our envelope, which is our internal messaging system. So this will allow you to send out course announcements or messages to your students or class section overall. And then lastly, this drop-down menu here, just a few things that I did want to point out. First, we have our live support option. So this is where students can always get in touch with a Hawks specialist through our 24/7 live chat. So like I mentioned at the beginning of today's presentation, just making sure that you're able to get in touch with us if you have any questions. The same goes for your students. So if they're ever up late at night, outside of those normal phone hours that I mentioned, that 4-ring phone policy, they can still get in touch with us here through that 24/7 live chat. We also have a training video here down below. It's just an introductory video that'll give students a brief overview of Hawks and where all their resources are housed. A lot of instructors will show this video on the first day of classes just to get students kind of acclimated to our system. We do offer student training sessions as well. At the beginning of every semester, we do a 2-week-long student training series where students can kind of join any session that they'd like that fits in with their schedule to get a full training on the Hawks system and have the opportunity to ask any questions that they have about account creation or accessing their homework lessons with a member of our training and support team. So that's the dashboard here. And then down below, I'm able to see the courses that I'm enrolled in, as well as my school, instructor, and section here, and a mini to-do list of those upcoming assignments. As a student, I can click directly on these assignments from this dashboard, or click on this blue View Course button, which will take me to my to-do list. So that's just a comprehensive breakdown of all of those upcoming assignments and due dates. You'll notice by default, these are broken out by those due dates. So due today, due within a week, and due later. Of course, you can leave these in order by due date by default, but I do want to show this page just to make mention that it is customizable for you as an instructor. So if you wanted to break these out by chapters or modules, whatever you'd like, you can change the order that these appear in, as well as these different headers here. I'm going to go ahead and pop into a homework lesson to show you what it looks like. So clicking on any lesson within Hawks for all of our English titles will bring you to this same landing page of our recommended learning path. So students will always follow this learn, practice, and certify 3-modular approach here as they're working through the homework lessons. So I'll click into learn to start with. And learn is a multimedia presentation of the textbook. So this is where students are reading through all of the relevant content and definitions here for this particular section. It does align perfectly with the print book and the ebook. It's just broken out into smaller, more bite-sized chunks for students. So, these 20 pages of content here are what students need to read through in order to be prepared to answer the upcoming homework questions for this lesson. We do have some interactive features kind of sprinkled throughout the learn mode here. You'll see these on your own for students to immediately start applying some of these concepts as they're reading through them. Some of these are printable as well. So we do have instructors that will use these tables as a reading check for students to, bring that printed version to class as a check that you were in that learn mode, reading through that content prior to coming to class. The guided notebooks are also a great way to ensure that students are reading through the content ahead of time as well. So we do see instructors doing things like notebook checks or bringing those filled out guided notebooks to, come prepared to discuss what was read in last night's homework assignment. We also have things like group activity suggestions and reflection questions sprinkled throughout the learn mode as well. And I wanted to show these for you as instructors. These are things that you could pull out and incorporate into class time. So if you, are teaching an online course, you could have students go into breakout rooms and do these group activities, or, structured discussion posts if you're teaching online. But with face-to-face, you could pull up the learn mode here and just call out to students some of these reflection questions in order to generate, that meaningful classroom discussion. One thing I wanted to point out about the learn mode here as well is that it's all customizable for you as an instructor. So if there's anything in here that you don't necessarily cover within the course, you can always hide screens as a whole, but you also have the ability to build in your own content in addition to what we present to students within the Hawks side of things. So this split screen here is just an example. If you had your own YouTube video or just definitions or examples that you've kind of collected over the years and want to continue using in your courses, you can build in that content here. So students aren't just seeing what Hawks has presented, but the customizations that you've made as well. And lastly, we do have a watch button here on the top left-hand side of the screen. This will pull what we call a lesson level video. It's going to give students an overview of everything that's covered in these 20 pages here in video format. So every lesson does have a matching video resource for students. They can watch before or after they're reading through that content, just to make sure that they didn't miss anything. These are just quick lecture style videos that are usually under 10 minutes long for students. Now, at any point, students can pop out of learn and head into that next recommended mode of practice. And practice is exactly what it sounds like for students. It's a penalty-free environment. They can jump in, start answering these practice style questions before they're getting to the actual graded or homework portion within the lesson. So we are giving them these algorithmically generated questions to work through here, as well as access to these learning aids down here at the bottom of the screen. So I'll walk through each of those to show you what students have access to here. This first one is our tutor button. If a student got to a question and had no idea where to begin, they can access tutor here, which will bring them to a helpful hint. So those will usually contain relevant definitions or examples for students, just things to get them thinking in the right direction of how do I begin answering this question here. This is especially helpful if your students are, working on Hawks outside of those normal classroom hours. If they're not able to raise their hand and ask you directly where to get started, the hint will at least get them thinking in the right direction and hopefully preparing them to answer that style of question. If something's not clicking from this tutor screen here, they can always toggle back to learn where that content was covered in those learn screens. Maybe they breezed over the reading before they jumped in, or they can click on solution to double check what the correct answer was for that question. So they do have that kind of unlimited answer key here within the practice mode, but just keep in mind, we're not quite to the homework portion yet. Students can also skip over questions. So if they want to come in and just focus on particular question types that they feel like they're struggling on, they can skip around here. They also have a try similar button. So if a student wants to try similar question types and get extra practice on any particular questions or topics, they can click try similar as many times as they want here to get that extra practice in. I'm going to go ahead and submit an answer here. And this is just an example of our click to select question type here. You'll see these kind of sprinkled throughout the courseware for any of our English titles. It's asking a student to select an element within a passage and identify it. So I'm going to go ahead and submit my answer. And I wanted to get this question incorrect to show you that explain error feature that I mentioned earlier. So let's go ahead and click in. Clicking on explain error will pull the question that I was just presented with, and it's not only going to tell me that my answer was wrong, but why my answer was wrong. So just keep in mind that our system has artificial intelligence that anticipates and diagnoses these common student errors that are made here in the platform in an effort to stop students in their tracks right away when they do make a mistake and let them know exactly where they've gone wrong. So this particular question here was asking me, which sentence needed revision in order to be, professional and appropriate. Of course, I selected the wrong answer here, but it goes on to tell me why. So the answer I chose uses appropriately formal and professional language. It then goes on to tell me what that looks like. So in real time, if I do make a silly mistake as a student, I can go back to practice, click try similar, and continue working until my performance improves. So we always say that this explain error feedback is the type of feedback that you would hope to give your students if you were able to sit down with every single one of them as they're working through these practice questions here. Now, at any point, students can head out of practice and enter that final mode of Certify when they're feeling confident and ready to go ahead and answer those homework questions for this lesson. So Certify is the credit bearing portion of the 3 learning modes here. This is what students are completing for a grade within the course. A couple of things to note about Certify here. So the question types are very similar to what students just work through in practice, but they're all algorithmically generated. So students are getting new versions of those question types. But if they did spend any time up front in practice, it certainly wasn't wasted. It'll ultimately better prepare students for the questions that are coming their way when they do get to the Certify mode. One key difference between practice and Certify here you'll notice is that we've removed the learning aids down here at the bottom of the screen. So students no longer have access to that tutor, skip, or try similar button. Ultimately, we just want to hold students accountable while they're in here completing these Hawks homework lessons to be able to stand on their own and ultimately prove that they've learned the content here within the lesson. At any point, we don't want them to become overly reliant on those learning aids that we provide to them within the practice mode, which is why we have that clear separation between the two. We hear all the time of other homework systems where students do have access to learning aids within the homework portion. And, students are scoring 100% on homework. They're doing great, but then come time to write a paper, apply those skills, or even take a test, those scores simply don't translate over. We do consider these to be lower stakes assignments for students. So it's okay if they're making mistakes here within the Certify mode. We just want to be very transparent with them right then and there. If they are struggling or making mistakes, let's tell them in the homework portion what they're struggling with so that they can go back and remediate before we get to those higher stakes assignments in the course, where it can oftentimes feel too late for students to go ahead and fix it. Now, one thing that's very unique about Hawks in our homework lessons is that we do use a mastery-based approach for these lessons. So what that means is we're asking students to reach a mastery level here at around 80% in order to achieve credit on their homework. And by credit, I mean 100% in the grade book once they've reached or exceeded that mastery level of a lesson. So as you can see here in this particular set, we've given students 10 questions. Of those 10, they have a little bit of wiggle room. So that 2 inside the red heart indicates the number of questions that they can miss, and they're still within that mastery threshold for the lesson. Now, if a student were to dip below and let's say miss a 3rd question in this set, our system's going to take them out of Certify and place them back into the practice mode with a custom set of questions based on what they just missed in Certify. So there is adaptive remediation that's built into our system. It'll allow students to kind of go back to that penalty-free environment, really focus on the question types that they're struggling on. And of course, they can access the tutoring aids and the error-specific feedback that we just walked through. At any point, students can come back in and attempt that Certify lesson again. So we're never going to block them out of Certify or take off points when they dip below the mastery level. They truly have unlimited attempts on these homework lessons up until the due date that you've set, and ultimately unlimited attempts to score that 100% in the grade book once they reach or exceed that mastery level of the lesson. Now, I will say everything in Hawks is customizable, of course. So everything that I just explained to you is kind of the way that it's set up by default. I will say you can customize the content in the learn mode here, like I showed you earlier. You can also customize within practice and certify. So if you want to go in and pick and choose which questions students are seeing for those modes, you can absolutely customize in that way from the instructor side. You can also adjust the number of questions that students are being presented with, as well as the mastery level of that lesson. So if you wanted to make it higher or lower, just based on what you think would be best for your students, you can absolutely customize those lessons to reflect what you have in mind. Now, outside of the Hawks homework lessons here, a couple of other things that I did want to share with you today. So first, this web test tab, like I said earlier, as an instructor, you'll have access to all of the different question types that we offer within our software to create any type of assessments, tests, or quizzes for students. And if you choose to assign those through Hawks, those would appear here under this web test tab. Now, one thing that we do have pre-created and available for instructors is this grammar diagnostic assessment, which is an optional assessment that you can choose to give to your students on grammar review chapters. Basically, how a diagnostic assessment works is, as an instructor, you'll go in and set a proficiency level for that test. So let's just keep the 80%. We'll go with 80% today. Students will then go in and complete this grammar diagnostic assessment that they see here under their web test tab. And for any lessons within that test that they meet or exceed that 80% threshold, they'll then test out of having to complete those lessons, and they'll only be assigned lessons where they did not meet proficiency. So in other words, giving students a customized learning path here for any areas that they personally may be struggling in, especially for a review topic like grammar. You know, if you don't have time to blanket assign to students all of these grammar lessons, but you do want to make sure that students are caught up to speed, diagnostic testing is a great way to do that. And you can make any test diagnostic as well. So this is just one that we've pre-created for English instructors that's widely used. But if you wanted to test on any topics that you feel like students are kind of coming in at all different levels at, you can make those tests diagnostic within Hawks. One thing that students have access to here is this practice web test button. So I did mention this under the student resources within my PowerPoint slide, but I wanted to show you how this works. So students can come in, they can set the number of questions that they'd like for themselves. They can even time themselves if that's something that they're struggling with. And then from here, they have access to all of the different chapters and lessons here to pull from. So if I know that first test or quiz in my course is going to be on, certain lessons from chapters 1 and 2, I can pull those together here and click start. And it will generate a practice test for me to work through as a student. One thing that's really nice about this practice web test feature here is that the setup looks very similar to an instructor assigned web test. So if you are assigning anything through the Hawks platform, students should be familiar with how to navigate and how to answer these questions here, because the format looks almost identical here for students for an instructor assigned web test. They have the ability to hide this time here on the top right-hand side of the screen. They can go ahead and answer questions here. Let's see. And then skip around just as they would with a pencil and paper test. So I'm going to go ahead and just answer a couple of these questions here, just to show you the type of feedback that students are getting as they're submitting this practice test and getting that feedback. And try not to cringe on my English folks out here as I'm, carelessly answering these questions. Hopefully your students would not be zipping through like this, but just for time purposes today, I just wanted to pop a couple answers in to see the feedback that students are getting. So as you can see here on the top or on the left-hand side here, this pie chart, their overall performance, the percentage of questions they got correct and incorrect. Of course, the ones I left unanswered today, but just giving them a good idea of how well would I have performed, if you as my instructor created this test and assigned it to me. And then here on the right-hand side is a breakdown of their performance by lesson. So it's showing me each lesson I used to compile and create that practice web test. Visually as a student, of course, I can see that little sliver of green, the areas I'm performing well in, and then the areas of red where I might want to dedicate more study time to. As a student, I can see those areas of red and I can actually click on them as well to generate more practice questions for me to work through within that corresponding lesson. So just the idea here of giving students as many practice opportunities as they need to in order to grasp these concepts, since they'll need to later apply them within the course. I can head out of practice here. I could pop into another lesson, or I could go in and review or retake that practice test. So these are saved for students and they can take them as many times as they need to, especially if they're trying to, improve their performance and grow their score. Heading back to our course here, the other thing that I wanted to share with you today is our Smart Review software that you can build out within the Hawks software. So this is an all-in-one writing submission platform here, and it's really flexible as far as the types of assignments that you can create and use the Smart Review software for. So I'm going to show you an example of a peer review assignment today and what that would look like for students. Keep in mind, you can create instructor review assignments here as well, but it looks like I've already uploaded my peer review paper and I need to go ahead and go in and complete that peer review and give feedback on one of my peers' writing submissions. So I'm going to go ahead and click start here and it will take me to my peers' writing submission here. So one thing that is kind of neat about the Smart Review software is that it does have the ability to be anonymous. So if you didn't want students to know which peer they're giving feedback to, you can make it anonymous for that purpose. You also have a lot of flexibility as far as the assignment description for students. So, if you wanted to outline, specific elements that they're looking for within this writing submission or, a minimum number of tags or comments, you can always require that in the assignment description. And, each one can be unique for any type of writing submission that you're doing here. Now, as a student, I can come in and add tags or comments. So I spotted an error right here just in this first sentence. I'm going to go ahead and highlight here and just make note that the I needs to be capitalized. And then here I can go ahead and add a tag to categorize the nature of that comment as well. So I can tag that as a capitalization error. And when I click save, that will go ahead and keep that highlighted there for my peer to read. As a student, when they're reviewing their feedback from their peers, they can go in and filter by tag. So if I wanted to see how many capitalization errors did I have in this particular writing submission, I can filter by those as well. Down below, we have a peer evaluation box as well that you can customize as an instructor. So you can set these different categories that students are rating and what number they're rating out of. I can come in and assign the appropriate score that I think this student has earned. And then there's a general comments box down below where I can really elaborate on how I arrived at those scores or elaborate on anything that you have outlined for students in the assignment description. If you have to, if you want students to comment on, how well the paper flowed or make any comments about, their overall thoughts on that writing submission, you could do that here and then go ahead and submit. And as an instructor, you'll be able to go in and review all of those writing submissions as well as the feedback for that students are giving. That is really everything that I wanted to share here on the student side of the platform. I know we have a couple more minutes, so I did want to show you a sneak peek of some of the instructor side of the platform as well. So let me just pull up my PowerPoint again. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions as well at the end. So I always tell instructors to think of the student side as the front-facing portion of the software. This is what students are seeing, and then the instructor side as the back end. So that's really where you can customize your course and see all of the reporting and analytics for how well your students are progressing through the Hawks courses and where they're spending their time. So I did include a couple of our key reports here that I wanted to share with you. The first one being assignment reviewer. So these screenshots are from our reporting tools within the Hawks software, and they basically show you time on task data for your class section overall, but it allows you to whittle down to individual students to see which questions they're missing, how many attempts it's taking them on their homework lessons, how long they're spending in learn and practice before they're getting to certify. So this first screenshot here is just kind of a bird's eye view. It's our submission status bar graph. So as you can see here, you can see, are those homework lessons being turned in on time? Looks like 1.2 here was all green. Everyone turned it in on time. But then we've got a couple here that are done late or overdue. So you can see overall, how well is my class progressing through the Hawks lessons? And then this second screenshot is our analytics tab here. So this will pull commonly missed questions among your students and show you the data behind those. So one thing that's really nice about this analytics tab is there's no actual student data that's displayed on this. It's strictly just commonly missed questions among your students. And so this is something that you could pull up in class time to go over with students and, say, whoa, 30% of you guys missed question 1 on last night's homework lesson. Let's go ahead and dedicate the first 5 minutes of class today to talk about it and discuss, where the disconnect is. And this tool here specifically, you can click on the question number and it will pull a similar question type to what your students saw. So it's just really nice that all of these reports are kind of running in the background and giving you as an instructor the tools that you need in order to intervene, spot red flags, and tailor class time based on the topics that you see your students are struggling with. Let me see, I think I have one more report here to show you. We do have our search by criteria report as well, and this allows you as an instructor to filter out student data based on grades or activity level. One thing that's really nice about this reporting tool here is that you can save your filters as well. So if you wanted to run this report every Monday morning while you're sipping your coffee and just kind of check in on class section data and how well they're doing. You can even compare different class sections together to see how well they're doing. You can run this report at any point. So you could filter out by students who have a specific grade between a certain range or students who haven't logged in for a certain number of days. You can also use these reports kind of in tandem with one another as well. So if you wanted to filter out based on students who haven't logged in for a certain number of days and have below a C in the course, you can filter those out in conjunction with one another to take a look at the list that you're working with and get in contact with those students directly. So as you can see here in this screenshot, it will filter out a list of students, and you can go ahead and check that box here at the top to send them all a message at once. They're all going to individual students. No one will see anyone else CC'd on that message, but you could say, it's a requirement that based on your grade, you have to come to office hours this week in order to, make up any lost time if you weren't logging into the software or whatever it is. The last one here I think we have is our web test objective report. And so this is an optional report. If you're assigning any assessments through Hawks, you can tie specific course objectives to those web test questions in order to check in on how well students are meeting those course objectives and can compare class sections to one another. Some of our schools that use this report use it for accreditation purposes as well, but it is optional. If you're not assigning any of those assessments through the Hawks platform, you won't be able to run this web test objective report. But if you are assigning tests and quizzes, you can set this up to have those questions tied to the objectives and then run it at any time throughout the semester. That is really everything that I had today. I'd love to take questions from anyone if we have any in the Q&A or in the chat.
All right, well, thank you so much, Laura. We do have a few questions here. The first is, what LMS systems do you integrate with?
Good question. So any of the largely popular ones, so Canvas, Brightspace, D2L, Moodle, and Blackboard. I will say if you're using a lesser known LMS system like Genzabar or some of those other ones, we do have schools that are using Hawks with Genzabar. You just basically have to export the grades from the Hawks side and upload into your LMS. It's really a quick and painless process, and many schools are doing it. So you can still house those grades from Hawks in your LMS, even if we don't have that direct sync set up.
Perfect, thank you. Our next question is, what is the licensing structure at Hawks?
Yep, so let me go back here to one of our first slides here. It really depends on how you want students to purchase their access codes. So within these purchasing models, you'll see that the first two columns here have that lifetime access for students. So if you're going the traditional route of having students purchase directly from your bookstore or direct from the Hawks site, they will benefit from that lifetime license. The only exception to that rule is really those inclusive access programs. So if your school is already enrolled in Barnes & Noble First Day or rolling the tuition or rolling the course materials into students' tuition, that is the only kind of unique scenario where students would have that singular semester access code, since that is included in their tuition and they paid for that singular semester.
All right, thank you so much. And our final question here is, could you remind us what resources we offer for instructors?
Yes, and I believe I had a slide on that as well. So here under the Instructor Resources column, we have chapter projects that you can pull from. We have lecture slides and then access to our full question bank to build out any tests or quizzes. I will say we have a lot of training resources as well that I didn't mention earlier. So, sample syllabi for your courses and just best practice tips for implementing Hawks into your courses. We never want you to feel overwhelmed as you're switching to a new system, to feel like you have to train yourself on this new system, then train your students. We have resources for both students and instructors as far as getting started. And, all of our schools that adopt Hawks are assigned a training and support representative in order to assist you with that training process and making sure your course is set up in the way that you're envisioning it.
All right, well, thank you so much, Laura. We are pretty much out of time here, so we'll go ahead and wrap things up. But thank you so much for all of the valuable information you shared with us today. If you do have any remaining questions, feel free to stop by our Hawks virtual booth to speak with a member of our Hawks team. And now we're going to go ahead and get started with the giveaways. And it looks like before we jump into those, we do have one last question in the chat. Laura, are you able to pop back on to answer that? It just came through.
Yes, I was just typing an answer. Kristen, I'm happy to connect you with your school's rep to get you access to those lecture slides. So I'm going to send you an email here shortly with access to those.
Yes, yep, just to clarify, you can always access those through your Hawks gradebook. So Laura will send more specific directions, but once we get you set up with access to a gradebook, you can either get to them through there or through our main website with a password. So Laura will get that information over to you. All right, so we'll go ahead and now jump into those prizes. So we'll go ahead and spin for our first winner. As a reminder, this is for a $25 Amazon gift card, and we will have 3 winners. All right, and our first winner is Jane Kessler. Congratulations, Jane. We'll now move on to our second winner. And it looks like that's going to be Patty Wagoner. Congratulations, Patty. We'll now spin for our third and final winner for this session. And that is Janet Thompson. Congratulations, Janet. We'll be sending out those prizes following the summit. The next concurrent sessions will begin at 12 p.m. Eastern. You can view the chat for session details or meeting room links, or access the conference website for a complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team, view a quick 5-minute demonstration, and you'll be entered to win the hourly giveaway. Your choice of a 6-month subscription to Audible, 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or $100 Amazon gift card. And we'll see you